of today. We're in the portion of Yisrael. We're holding in today is Wednesday. We're holding the fourth reading in that chapter 19, verse number 1. Chodesh Hashlishi, in the third month, when the Jewish people left the land of Egypt, on that day, Bo Midbar Sinai, they came to the desert of Sinai. Rashi says, Vayem Hazeh, what means on this day, on the first day of the month, Rosh Chodesh. According to the context, scripture ought to have said Bayem Hazeh, on that day. What is the meaning by Yom Hazeh, on this day? It indicates that the words of Torah should always be as like it's a new experience, by Yom Hazeh. Not that it happened sometime 3,000 years ago, but by Yom Hazeh, it happened today. By Yisru Midafidim, they traveled from the Fidim, by Yovu Midbar Sinai, and they came to the desert of Sinai, by Yachnu Midbar, and they encamped in the desert. By Yichan Sham Yisrael, and the Jewish people encamped Neged Ahar, facing the mountain. Now she says they left Refidim. Why does the Torah have to tell us that? Why did we know where they went from? Didn't we already state they encamped in Refidim? So it's obvious if you've camped in Refidim and now you went and you're in Sinai, you went from Refidim. Rather, it intends to compare the journey from Refidim to their arrival at Sinai Desert. Just as the arrival at the Sinai Desert was a state of repentance, so too the journey wasn't repentance. They basically getting rid of all their idols and all the past of Egypt. So they were on the journey. As we know, there was a 50-day journey from Mitzrayim, from the land of Egypt. It was 50 days that it took this journey from Mitzrayim, from Egypt to the Sinai Desert, to the Mount Sinai. Yisrael. So it's an interesting word. It says over there, Yichan is a singular word. He encamped. So Rashi says, as one man. So they as one man with one heart. But all the rest of the stops from then and on, this was the last time. Good things don't last forever. And basically they encamped there as one person. But then in the rest of the journeys, as you listen to the Torah, there was always somebody who was complaining. Neged Ahar, one means to the facing the mountain, the eastern side. Similarly, any place you find Neged, it's usually in the Torah, it's called the eastern side. Verse number 3, Moshe Elohim, and Moshe Rabbeinu went up to God, Vayikra Elav Hashem min Ahar, and God called him out from the mountain. Lamer saying, this is what you should say to the house of Jacob, the Sagid L'bnei Yisrael, and related to the Israelites. Rashi says in Moshe Allah, he got up. What do you mean? The second day of Rosh Chodesh Sivan. He ascended the mountain, and it was early in the morning, as it says. Moshe Rabbeinu got up early in the morning. Later on, Kaisaymar Belashon Hazeh, in this style, Ukeseder Hazeh, in this order. That means, as you're going to say, Lebeis Yaakov, to the house of Jacob, these are the women. Same Lashonaka. When you talk to women, you should be a gentleman. And you should talk to them gently. Besagid, when you talk to men, you should tell them in a causative form. And you should tell them the rewards and punishments, things that are harsh, so to say, higidin. So therefore, you should to the men, you should talk in one way, and to the women, you should talk in another way. Verse number 4, you've seen what I've done in Egypt. And I carried you on the wings of a neshadim, it's of a vulture. And I brought you here. Rashi says, Atem Ne'isem, you have seen. This is not some tradition. I'm not telling you some story that happened, nor something that I'm sending to you in the written words or attesting to you through witnesses. I'm not telling you something that you have not seen. You have seen what happened. It's not a story that happened in the past. So this generation of going out of Egypt, was in a generation that saw everything. And you were already guilty of many sins before me, before they conspired against you. But I punished them only on your account. And I carried you. This was the day Israel came to Ramses. For when Israel dispersed over the entire land of Goshen. But when they traveled to leave Egypt, a miracle, it's in a miraculous short while, they all assembled together in Ramses. You should realize that this was not a group of 10 people or 70 people. Millions of people came together and camped together, traveled together. This was a miraculous journey of the Jewish people. This was not a small group of people. And therefore, this was an amazing event. You can't imagine the logistics today to be able to move such a group of people. It would take months and months of planning. And this happened overnight. They were chased out of Mitzrayim. So this was a miraculous event. And therefore, it happened through my account. Onkelos translates, I made you travel. It's like almost like God, as God says, Al Kanfin Asharim, like a griffin vulture who carries its young upon its wings. Why? For all other birds place their young in between their feet, because they're afraid of other birds that fly above them. But a griffin vulture is not afraid of any man. He's only afraid of a man, a human being that might shoot him with a bow and arrow. But he's not afraid of any other animal, because other birds fly. Perhaps an aim arrow, but not other birds, because no other bird flies above it. It is therefore place its young upon its wings, saying, "Better the arrow enter me than in my children." God said, "I did the same thing." The angel of God moved and became between the Egyptian camp, as it says in the Torah last week, and the Egyptians were firing arrows and stones and missiles, but the clouds absorbed them. So the Jews had the Iron Dome a long time ago, going out of Mitzrayim. Rashi says, look at the Targum, look at Onkelos, how he translates it, and I brought you near to my service. Verse number 5, if you hearken to my voice, and you'll protect and you will keep my covenant. And you'll be a treasure for all the nations. Because the entire land is mine. Now she says, so now, if you accept upon yourself now to perform the commandments, it will become more pleasant for you from this point on. Leaving Egypt, all the slavery, all this hardship, it's going to be something in the past. Shmaitim is brisi, and you'll keep my covenant that I will make for you regarding the keeping of the Torah. Segula, what's a segula? It's a precious treasure. Segula Smalachim, a royal treasure, which is expensive objects and gemstones that the king stores away. Similarly, you will be for me a treasure, singled out of the nations. Do not say, however, that you alone are mine, and I have no other beside you. And therefore, who else do I have beside you that is precious to me? And I'm sorry, because I have the world. For the entire world is mine. That my eyes, nevertheless, even though the entire world and everything that's in it is mine, I have treasured you. Verse number 6, and you'll be a kingdom of nobles and of a goy kodesh and a holy nation. These are the words that you should talk to the Jewish people. Now she says, you'll be to me a kingdom of priests. As a result of serving God by the Torah, the Jews will be considered as nobles, just as the Bnei David Kehanim, as it says that the children of David were nobles. So over here, the word Kehanim means not priests, because only if you're a son of family of Aaron. El Hadvarim, Rashi says, these are the words. In contrast to other instances where Moshe Rabbeinu explained the law of the Torah, here he was enjoined to repeat precisely these words. El Hadvarim. These are the words that God says, I'm looking for a nation of noble nation. I'm looking for a nation that are nobles and that are a great nation. And that completes this. That completes the Chumash of the day. We go to the Tanya of the day. We are holding on the 24th chapter of Tanya. The Alter Rebbe says in chapter 18, there's an introduction over here. The Alter Rebbe began to explain how it's very near and accessible to each of us to serve God out of a feeling of love and awe by the means, and that we should be able to awaken up this love, the hidden love that is latent in all of us. To clarify how this hidden love can lead to observance of mitzvahs, the Alter Rebbe proceeded with the holding in the last chapters, proceeded to discuss the relationship of all mitzvahs to the precepts and belief and to the prohibition against idolatry. The unity of God, he explained, means not only that there is but one God, rather that God is the only existent being. That's the important belief. God is all of existence. He is existence. Nothing else exists out of God. So therefore, everything in existence is because God exists. And all else is contained within him. Conversely, idolatry does not necessarily mean a denial of God's existence. That's why idolaters believe in God. Doesn't change, they believe in God. They believe that God's in the heavens and the idols in the earth. So they don't believe that that God exists right over here. But they believe in God's existence. The expression is they call the God of all gods because they have many gods. So they say, oh, God is a higher God. Today, God is the Father and the Son, a place for us. So you have the concept and not the denial of God. And that's idolatry does not necessarily mean the denial of God's existence or him being unique. Any assertion that something exists beyond and separate from God also constitutes idolatry. So therefore, any Aveda, any person that does a sin is also idolatry. That's what the Gemara says. A Ganif, a thief, the Gemara says a thief, before he goes to Gamvi, prays to God. He prays to God, he does a prayer to God that he should be successful in his thievery. How you do the two together, it's impossible, really. But he believes in God and he hopes that God makes him successful. He doesn't understand that God said you cannot steal. So if you believe in God, how are you stealing? Look, today, people killing people in the name of God. Everybody's... So in chapter 23, the Alter Rebbe went on to state that through Torah and mitzvahs, in which the divine will stands revealed, one reaches a perfect union with God. In this chapter, the Alter Rebbe now goes into what happens when you do an Aveda. What happens when somebody does a sin? God forbid. Explains that a transgression has exactly the opposite effect of a mitzvah. Where a mitzvah joins one with God, a transgression severs one from him. Whereas a mitzvah tests to God's unity, a transgression implies the opposite, the idolatry. That God is not united with the situation right now. God is not part of the situation. Or I believe God is part of a situation that he doesn't want to be part of. That's the Ganef who prays to God. That's the thief who prays to God that he should be successful in his thievery. He doesn't realize that God has no desire in this action. So let's see how the Alter Rebbe says. Since everything in the realm of holiness has a counterpart. There's a plus and there's a minus, a yin and a yang. That's the way everything God created. There's always one thing that is the opposite of the other. Opposites. In the holy realm of Sitra Achra, there is also an unholy counterpart to the observance of mitzvahs and to the study of Torah, which produces the union of God, and their counterpart is. What is the counterpart of everything that is holy? The Eibishter God, in essence, the Torah says that there is, just like there's holiness, there's unholiness. Everything has its counterpart. And therefore, just like there's a mitzvah, there's, God forbid, the opposite of a mitzvah. Whether it's the Iraisa, whether it's the Torah prohibition, or the Choles Rabbanim, or the rabbinical prohibitions. Why are they the opposite? Because they are because they are contrary to God's wisdom. You might disagree. You might say you don't hold by it. It has nothing to do with it, whether it's God's wisdom or not. So this is what God's wisdom and will is, that you shall not do this. And therefore, it's not that there's good and bad. It's a total opposite of good. It's a total opposite of holiness. Holiness is unity. Unholiness is disunity. Ve'nefradim, it represents a total separation. For the oneness and the unity of God. B'tachlis hapirid mamish. It's not a little separation. It's not a semi-separation. It's a total separation. And when a person does, God forbid, a sin, he's basically separating himself from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They are called Sitra Achra. That's why it's called the other side. And the Klippa is called the covering, which is called idolatry. That's why every Aveda is called idolatry. Because just like idolatry, we all understand that bowing down to an idol is the opposite of godliness. If I believe in God, how am I bowing down to a piece of metal? How am I bowing down to a piece of wood? We all can comprehend, or a cow, whatever it might be. We understand it. We comprehend it. That's a total opposite of what God is. So too, every Aveda, we should also comprehend that every sin is the opposite of what we're trying to accomplish in the world. And I've made other gods. You don't have to make an idol as another god, but anything that I do that is the opposite of God, whether I steal or whatever it might be, because God is there. God is in the idol. If God wasn't in the idol wouldn't exist. So the God's in the idol, but it's, again, as we learned before in the previous chapters, hester upon him. There's the divine concealment in this situation. There's not the concept of a face-to-face relationship with this situation. It's the concept of the concealment of God, which we explained, we explained before already this, that they receive their life force from the hinder part, so to say, of the divine will, the level of Acharayim, the backside, and for this reason, they're called the Kilachayim, other gods. Now, the truth is, the Alter Rebbe is going to get a little tough over here, because as the Alter Rebbe explained, that the neshama is made up of 10 attributes. The 10 attributes of the soul, which is Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, give it 10 attributes. And then the Alter Rebbe said that there's Levusha neshama. There's the garments of the soul. And that we don't have the power of the neshama. The neshama, as we say every day in davening, is tahira, is pure. And the neshama, my soul and its character is pure. The problem is the garments I put on my neshama. The garments. Now these garments, oy vey, I can create machshava zaris. I can have dirty garments. I can create levushim that are totally negative, whether it's in thought, speech, or in action. So too the three garments of the soul, which comes from the three garments of a klippa. The garment is, to begin with, is a klippa. The garment is a classical klippa. Klippa means a covering, and the garment is the covering. Garment is a covering to begin. The word of a garment is to cover. So I'm hiding behind my speech. I'm hiding behind my actions. It's a covering, but hopefully a covering that is going to be good. That's why it's called klippat noiga. It's called a covering that shines. We have different kinds of covering. Shemachshava, divra, mais, which is the 300, which is thought, speech, and action. If we, God forbid, if we take these garments and we think of doing a sin, and we speak about doing a sin, chas v'shalom, we do the sin, we have now garment ourselves with the garments of evil, with the garments that are totally separate. We have created, actually, we created a garment that is this, that basically separates ourselves and separates our neshama from its true existence. And so too, not only do we garment our godly soul, but now our animalistic soul, because we use our body. The machshava is enclosed in my brain, so I'm using my brain for negative. I'm using my mouth for negativity. I cannot think. I cannot speak. I cannot feel without my vital soul. So now I've garmented my godly soul. I have now put on evil garments, and now I have dragged my animalistic soul. I've dragged my vital soul into negativity. I brought it to a total separation. Why? Because because at that time, when I do the sin, they have become completely united. They have become completely united with the other side, the klippazu, and this covering. And this is called Avodah Zarah. And this is called idol worship. And now the Alter Rebbe gets a little more tougher. He says, "V'loyoid," and not only are they united with Klippa, with this covering, and thus equal to it, but actually it gets a little worse. They nullify themselves. They become secondary and subservient to this Klippa, to this idol, to this evil. I've now become subjugated to this evil. You become worse than the evil, because the evil had no choice, and I had the choice. So the evil is a challenge, which God created in the world. As I said, just like God created good, God created bad. If God didn't want anybody to steal, he didn't have to make a mitzvah, don't steal. He could have not have in the system stealing. Imagine if there would be a situation that people wouldn't have the desire to steal. That's all God needed to do. If God didn't want people to do adultery, he would have created that. He would basically take the desire of adultery away from people. So the Eibishter gave adultery to people, and he gave the capability of stealing to people, and on and on and on, so that we would overcome it, so we would say no to it. So now we do it, God forbid. So then we're worse than the Klippa itself. We have chosen to diminish ourselves. Because the Klippa is not clothed in a corporal body. The corporal body, hence, is more exposed to divine light. And it knows its master. And it's not, and he knows it does not rebel against him, God forbid, by any independent act of sending its evil messengers. If it wasn't that God wanted it to do it, No evil has its free choice. This is one of the major things that, even, the person wrote a book of why the bad things happen to good people. He said evil's out of control. Evil, God doesn't control evil. Chas v'shalom. God created evil. He controls evil. Evil has no free choice. It's human beings that choose to clothe themselves in evil. The evil does exactly what God created it to do. Any evil act of Sitra Achra is performed only in the service of God. Thus, the Klippa, not clothed in a body, cannot rebel against God's will. Imagine if nobody ever did any evil. So evil would never become part of anything. That's what happened. Before the tree of knowledge, there was evil. It says there was a tree of good and bad. You imagine if they wouldn't have eaten from that tree. We would know such a thing as we would know, there's an evil thing, but nobody would want to have to be, nobody would get involved with it. Why would I take evil within me? Why would I do that? Nobody would do that. But the problem is right now we have evil within us. And that's why we continue to choose this concept. Even though it's an alien thing to a human being, evil. Any negative thing is an alien thing to a human being. But he chooses to do evil. You can't blame the evil that I choose to do evil. Don't do evil. Evil wants you not to do evil. Not only does the evil doesn't want you to do evil. Hence, so therefore, it is even lower than the Klippa. Then therefore, ultimately, the evil act that I do, God forbid, is lower than the challenge that it gives me the evil to do. Ukimaima Bilam, as we see Bilam himself. Bilam is the epitome in the Torah of evil. And what does Bilam say? I cannot do what God tells me, but what God tells me to do. So although Klippa, why are we calling Klippa a negative thing? Because even though that's what Alter Rebbe says, even though Klippa is called Avodah Zarah, idolatry, which is denial of God, yet they refer him in the Gemara. Klippa calls out. They say that God is the God of all gods. Yeah, sure, God is the God. They know who God is. But they got a mission. They got no choice. The kippah has no choice. If it was given the choice, it would not entice anybody. It has no choice. They cannot violate God's will. Because they perceive the kli. Imagine the Avodah Zarah itself, the kippah, we understand itself who he is. And they know that their existence comes from God. And they understand that their nurture is from the hindermost aspect of God, which encompasses them. But their sustenance and life was within them. That's the exile. That's why it says when Mashiach comes, God will take away impurity from the world. That's it. The world will not know anymore of something impure. Basically, there's not going to be impurity in the world. There won't be any evil in the world. Right now, there is evil doing its job, and God gives it a job. Does he want the job? No. The job is a challenge. He wants a job that the Alter Rebbe gave the mashal many months ago in Tanya of the king and the harlot and the prince. He doesn't want the harlot doesn't want to be successful. The king doesn't want it to be successful. Even the prince doesn't want it to be successful. He cannot give in to his taiva. For some reason, he cannot give in to his desire. And he hopefully doesn't fall into it, but sometimes he does. That the state of exile, so that they regard themselves as God, which is the denial of God's unity. But they don't completely, and nobody's heretical to deny God and to assert that he does not exist. They call him the God of all gods. They recognize that their life comes ultimately from the existence of God's will. Therefore, Klippa never rebels against God's will. The only one who can rebel against God is a human being. Therefore, you understand this. A person who violates God's will, he's worse and more debased than the clip in the Sitracha, because he has choice. They had no choice. So don't blame the messenger. That's what they express. Don't blame the messenger. Don't blame evil. Blame the person that does evil. Blame the Pharaoh, who, even though God hardens his heart, still should use his free choice. There's no excuse to say no. Not to say no, or to say yes, whatever. For a good thing to say yes, for a bad thing to say no. Nobody has taken away that free choice from anybody. And you can be anywhere and any place, and you still have your free choice. And that's where you should realize what the difference between a human being and the rest of the world and everything else in the world. The prophet says even a cow knows its source. Every cow comes back to the barn. It knows who feeds it. So even an animal knows who feeds it. A sheep knows the shepherd. He knows. Ultimately, comes back. A human being, chas v'shalom, can deny his creator. So far, a human being can go that he can deny who feeds him. So in essence, he's worse in a way. You should realize it. Instead of condemning, I'm not condemning the right concept. I have to look at myself. And I have free choice. I have, in essence, more free choice than evil. Than sitrachla. And when a person does this sin, so then he's worse than the sin itself, because the sin itself, so to say, is not separate from God. It knows its job. Well, a person that, God forbid, does a sin has at that moment separated himself from God. In the ultimate separation in that aspect, he's in total denial, and he's in total rebellion of what this concept is. And he can say it doesn't make a difference if he did it intentionally, doesn't do it intentionally. It doesn't make difference. That's not the point. The point over here is the person has to realize that when he does a sin, he's in denial of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this aspect. Maybe he's not doing idol worship. He's saying, like, that's what most of us say. Oh, this is not idol worship. It's not here now going against anybody. Oh, I'm talking a little Lashon Hara, talking a little evil talk. What's so terrible? But at that moment that I'm talking evil, at that moment, I'm pashut. I'm simply in denial. I'm simply in a total different world. Right? Why? Because I have separated myself at that moment, betachlis hayichud, from the oneness of God, yoser, even more, and I'm worse than the idol. I'm more rebellious to God than the idol. For the idol, again, I had no choice. So why am I blaming the idol? Somebody makes an idol, built an idol out of wood. That's worse than a human being that does it, that does the opposite of what God wants. That doesn't make any sense. The human being that does worse, that does something against God, had free choice. The idol had no free choice. So too, the clipper had no free choice. Any clipper in the world, the challenge, the darkness, they had no free choice. The Heibush, God created this darkness. You have to ask yourself, why does God want darkness? That's the question. Not if God created it or not. God created it. Why did God want darkness in the world? It's a major question. And every person has to come to his own solution. Why did God give me this challenge? Right? Every one of us has certain challenges. Why did God give me this challenge? What does a challenge have to do to me? Because this challenge is talking to me. This challenge is given to me. As it's brought down in Kabbalah in Eitz Chaim, Portal 42, at the end of chapter 4, that the evil in this corporal world is the dregs of the coarse clipper. And it's a sediment of the purifying processes. Abir. We have to realize that it's all, in essence, about bitter. It's all about sifting, rectification, and so on. Meaning, after whatever sparks of good that are found in clippers have been isolated and elevated, what remains of the clipper is the lowest, coarsest form. This clipper is the evil found in this material world. So we have to realize, we have to get rid of the dross and elevate the good. Find the good in everything and get rid of the negative. Ultimately, the Eibishter is going to have to get rid of the evil in the world. It's not in our realm to do. It's we can rectify things. We can sift through things. We can elevate things. But ultimately, the tumah in the world, God says, I will ultimately get rid of tumah. I'll get rid of darkness. That's my job. You have to do bitter elements. You have to separate the good from the bad. That's your job. Know what is good. Know what I've given to you in today what is good and what is the opposite of good. I've given to you what's life, what's the opposite. And choose the good of it. Are the bad going to still be in the world? Yeah. The tzaddik transforms the bad. A regular Jew needs to do bitter, needs to do the separation, the shmare, to separate as you do with wine. You take the shmarim, you left the heavy parts go on the bottom, and then you sift away the top, the lighter parts. And therefore, you should realize, the Alter Rebbe says, this is brought down in the Zohar, which the Alter Rebbe brought down before already. That's why we understand that this world is a harsh world. It's a tough, harsh world. But and the wicked prevail. Because we're living in a world where klippus is very strong. There's a lot of dreg. There's a lot of dross. There's a lot of heavy concepts in this world. And slowly but surely, when you start separating good from evil, that's when evil accentuates itself. Because you think evil wants to disappear, doesn't want to disappear. Because it wants to be here, just like good wants to be here. But it becomes extremely koshim v'royim. You see the negative in such forms that it's unbelievable. And as we see today, and the negative is so, and that's what's going to happen before Mashiach, is the concept of the revelation of negativity. That the negative till now could have hide itself, but ultimately the negative is going to be revealed. Koshim v'royim, how negative it is, how strong it is, how heavy negativity is in comparison to the concept of good. And therefore, the more we stick away from that concept, the more we connect to the good, the more this negative will fall to its place. This negative will collapse and fall down to its place. Ultimately, God will, once it falls to its place and it goes down to where it belongs, then the Eibishter will do what he's supposed to do. We're supposed to do bitter. We have to separate it, and God will take care of the negative. And that ends the problem. Is the second we justify the negative, so to say, that's when we have tzaddis. That's when we have problems. When we start justifying the negative and we give some credence to negativity and to evil, that's when we have the issues. Okay, that's a beautiful Tanya of today. I'm trying to find that yam. Okay, today is the 14th day of the month of Shvat, chapter 72 to chapter 76 in Tillim. You do those 5 chapters, you do the chitas of the day. The Rebbe writes in today's Hayom Yom. First of all, tonight is Tu B'Shvat. Starts Tu B'Shvat, so we don't say Tachran at Mincha. And number 2, our holy forebearers, the Rabbeim, through the generations, appeal to God and invoke divine compassion towards the Chassidim, those bound to them. This was not all. They also had an avodah of bringing their Chassidim to mind, inwardly, pondering their affection and attachment to the Rebbe. Pondering their affection and attraction that the Chassidim had to the Rebbe, and responding, so to say, that affection and that attachment to the Chassid. Bringing someone to mind has the effect of arousing that person's innermost powers. We see when one looks deeply and intensely at another, he will turn around and return the gaze, because the penetrating gaze awakens the core of the soul. Thought has the same effect. Thinking about somebody else, even as the famous statements of the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitch Rebbe, Trach gut vet sein gut, that a thought, a positive thought, goes a long way. Positive thought, that it has a great power. Thought and gazing at somebody has a powerful effect on somebody else. Have a wonderful and beautiful day. And Amid Shem, hopefully we'll see you all tomorrow, 8 o'clock, Tu B'Shvat, Rosh Hashanah Leilanos. We'll see you all tomorrow at 8 a.m. Wish you a wonderful and beautiful day.